Welcome back to Between Two White Coats, a podcast designed to help you be the healthiest version of yourself. I'm Dr. Michelle Plaster, a family medicine doctor.
And I'm her co-host, Amber Foster, a family nurse practitioner. In our combined 30 years in medicine, we've seen a lot.
We're discussing key issues surrounding health and wellness, answering some of our biggest questions, overcoming health obstacles, and giving patient-centered advice in hopes of educating you and providing the tools you need to live a healthy life.
If you find our podcast helpful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review. This will help other people find our podcast.
Thanks for joining us. We look forward to serving you.
Thank you for joining us on Between Two White Coats. We still have our friend Sammy Chang here, who is on his 3rd episode. So please, if you didn't listen to the first 2, I think there was some really valuable information on burnout. We're a nation in crisis on burnout. We are hustle culture, go, 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 until you simply cannot go anymore. There are a lot of people in healthcare who are burning out, but there are a lot of people in a lot of fields who are burning out. We say to people all the time, your life is meant to have meaning and purpose. And really, when you said in the last episode that you don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, but you say instead,
What problems do you want to solve?
what problems do you want to solve? We're gearing people from young ages to have to put themselves into a box when they don't even know themselves yet. I just always say to my son, what I want you to be when you grow up is happy. And whatever happy looks like, that's what you should be doing. And so Sammy is back to share.
And he does say, by the way, that he wants to be his dad.
He wants to be his dad. He does. He continuously says,
Which makes me die
I love my job so much. So then he continuously says, I don't want to be a doctor, Mom. Like, it looks hard. It looks hard.
I want to do what Dad does. That makes me die laughing.
What Dad does looks easy. And it's truly because I have such a big personality. I make everything look hard, and my husband's so laid back, he could make anything. He could be like the president, make it look easy. So yeah, he wants to be his dad when he grows up.
It makes me laugh.
And I think he knows that drives me crazy because I really just want him to be me.
Best.
Yeah, so he knows exactly. So we're finishing out with Sammy's story, and we're talking really about the importance of finding happy. And what Sammy wants to be when he grows up is happy. And so,
and we want Sammy happy.
We want Sammy happy.
I'm smiling.
So, that's right. So this transition to happy, we talked in the prior episodes about when you started feeling what burnout feels like, and some of the conversations that you kind of had with yourself, had with your wife, that led you to know it's time to make a change. What was the resistance to making that change?
Handful of things. A big one would probably be financial. Speaking of burnout, emergency physician reimbursement is going down every single year because people don't think that we're worth what we get paid for. And so it's still, right now, it's decent pay. And so the financial security that I had in my position with healthcare benefits, income, that was a big one. And honestly, we've, gone out on a limb of faith and stopped traditional insurance because I'm going to go on tangents here, but insurance companies are a big reason people are burning out in medicine.
Yes,
and I want that on record. Mm-hmm. Insurance companies, excessive healthcare corporation, and government control is why we are burning out as physicians. So I'm sorry to any of my friends in any of those areas, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
But financial is a big one. Reputation, which I've tried to tell people who are aspiring to go into medicine not to make medicine your identity. But truth be told, I'm human, and for a while it was neat to, if somebody, I don't tell people outwardly what I do, but if they ask, you have a point of pride to say I'm an emergency physician, a board certified one.
As you should. It took you forever to get there.
It did.
That's right. And it's important work, and it's hard work, and,
right.
and we should be proud of it. I think we as a culture put a lot of, what's the first thing that, someone says, do you go to a dinner party? What do you do for a living? We put a lot of identity in what we do for a living. Oh, you're just a that, or oh, you're a that. And look, my chest puffs out when I say I'm a doctor. I worked hard to become a doctor. I feel like it's an important job that I do. And so a lot of my identity is pulled into
right.
that. So I think, in a lot of careers, we identify as that, and then who am I if I am not that? So I think reputation and even deeper self-identification is a barrier to why people don't act when they know that they're not happy in their job.
I think the other one is comfort level, which is crazy because I know what I know there, and I'm in a routine despite how much stress that brings when I'm on that routine.
Change
but I
is
know it.
hard.
Yes,
and
I think that's
a big one. And when you're burnt out, you're tired. And tired people don't take on hard.
Right.
And so it is like just the idea of change can be, you know what, this is the demon I know versus some other demon I don't know.
I tell people all the time, being at work is the easiest part of my day because when I get home, I mean, you know, I am running.
Right.
When I leave here because my kids play sports, we're involved at church, like all the other things that we do, like the comfort level here. Well, I know what I'm getting into. Like,
right. And
I signed up for this.
Right.
So,
and imagine if all day is crazy stressful and you feel
burn
no
out.
control.
Yeah.
And then you start.
Because I definitely don't feel control at home.
Like,
that's running.
Right.
So, like, you know, like the comfort, like you said, like you knew what you
Yeah.
were doing because that's what you do. You've been doing it for so long.
So, you know, I think that the burn is long for a lot of people. And I think one of the solutions, we really want to hit a lot of possible solutions in this episode. And one of the solutions is trying to recognize it earlier, trying to be okay with admitting I'm not happy in this, and that's okay, and I'm allowed to ask for happy, and recognizing the barriers that you have that may keep you from asking for being happy.
You mentioned that initially you noticed it in year 3. So you went from year 3 to what year is this?
This
10
is
or
entering
11?
year 10.
Yeah, year 10. So it took you 7 years to be
To
like
take action. To
take action.
No, honestly, it was even in residency. I realized, and it's funny because now that, and we'll get into this, but now that the whole reason I'm here today, but it took me 12 years, I tell people, to realize that emergency medicine and my personality don't entirely mix.
Yeah. So let's just jump right into that because Sammy and we respect everyone's beliefs, but we believe that things are very divinely placed. I don't really believe in coincidences. I think that things all are happening in some plan that's bigger than us. So Sammy and I were on the phone with each other, and it wasn't a recruiting phone call. It was just a conversation. I think God just put us on the phone with each other. And so as Sammy was saying, like, I just don't think I should have done medicine. And I think, you know, very much you were so uncomfortable in what you were doing that you were like, every bit of this is not for me. And I said, I think you sound like a great doctor. I think you sound like the person I would choose to be my doctor. I don't think you should be in the ER. Everything about, you know, Sammy told me, and this is a story that I will forever identify with you. You told me that you had an older person that you saw in the emergency room, and you had to give them some bad news with terminal diagnosis, I think, and then they didn't live far from you, so then you were stopping off at their house to check in on them. And I said, Sammy, that's what primary care doctors do. That is not what doctors do.
Well, I've stopped at patients' houses before.
Of course,
yes.
of course we have, yeah. And I mean, Dr. Kirkland does home visits as part of his weekly job. And so I was like, no, you have great compassion and great scientific knowledge. You're just not an ER doc. And so, you know, at that point we started talking about maybe it's not, and I feel like, you know, a lot of what we talked about in the last episode is how much we need physicians. And as someone who owns a primary care practice, I guess I should be concerned about more as competition. And I'm like, no, please bring on all the more. We need more doctors. There are enough sick people to go around. There are not enough doctors to go around. And so I was really like, well, Sammy, what would it look like if you didn't leave healthcare, but you left the ER? And was that the first that you had really thought about?
Yeah, I mean, I had, like we talked about, I had gone down to 50%, and I'm working as a medical director for a hospice company. You know, I was trying to find alternate means of income, and I'm thankful for that because the people I work with there have a different calling, and they are awesome. But I don't actually.
And you were already feeling some satisfaction from doing like 1 day a week directing.
Yeah,
hospice
you know, I was.
Those phone calls and.
It's tough because I don't have that patient interaction because I'm covering a branch that's not as close. So in general, hospice medical directors don't
Right.
interact
The medical
with the
director
patients.
really is the support for the people
Correct.
who are in the field, but not in
Right.
the field.
But just seeing their passion for patients in a hard time of life, I mean,
Yeah.
and their families, like it's a really neat thing to see people who are truly called to something and thriving in it. But yeah, I had that, and I thought for the next 5 or 10 years, I'll keep riding out the emergency medicine thing, and hopefully put enough away that we
your
can
plan
stop
was
early.
really, I'm going to work this job that's killing me until I have enough money to stop working
Yeah.
this job that's killing me.
And we were my wife and I, she's infinitely more wise than I am, but has done so many things to kind of help us find more passive income. So whoever's listening to this, don't spend all your money if you become a physician. Do not live a physician lifestyle.
Yeah.
That will hurt you.
Yeah.
But for us, we didn't do that. We didn't buy the big house, and then we started investing in real estate when we could. And so that's been helpful. Like there's been things. And
it
so
gave you some options.
it gave
because
us options.
One of the primary things keeping you from doing what you had figured out you needed to do was making sure you were financially okay.
Right.
And making sure then that you internally dealt with, well, what will be my identity if I'm not that, and what will this look like to other people?
Right.
And I do think that there's an important conversation for anyone who's struggling with burnout. And at the end of all of it, your happiness is not defined by what other people think or
Right.
say or believe to be true about you. Most other people don't really know you, and they certainly don't get to tap in on how you feel at the end of the day. And so I would say if you struggle with putting that aside, get help, speak with a counselor, and put aside what does this look like to everyone else, because your internal happiness cannot be defined by what this looks like. And I think in high functioning fields, judges, lawyers, doctors, people who burn out a lot, we stay because it's our identity, and we stay because it's our reputation and what it looks like to other people. And those are bad reasons to stay.
Right.
And will not bring you, overall happiness. And so I think it's important that we all just be real with ourselves. That exists. That's real and it's true, and it's something that we can process. And if we're struggling with it, there's a lot of help out there for people who may be struggling with that. Then the transition of actually leaving, I remember one of your other barriers was you love your partners, you love your group. They have been very supportive of you, and you have a great friendship with them. Sometimes we don't leave because the people that, especially if you're on the front lines in a war, you don't leave your soldiers, even though you want to leave the war.
Right.
And so I remember you also saying, I really struggle on telling my group this, and I remember you telling me like that was the hardest thing. Like when I told him I was leaving, it was the hardest thing. But also, your group wants you to be happy. People who care about you want you to be happy, and they don't want you to stay, and they don't want you to, as you said in the first episode, have a tantrum when it's going really bad on a day in the ER. And so, and I've sat a million times as an employer, jobs aren't typically the whole book. They are a chapter. They are a few chapters. I am always thrilled to get to be chapters in someone's book. But those chapters end, and we're not all meant to work one place for, and those of us who are Gen Xers and definitely the baby boomers, we think you take one job, you keep one job, and you leave that job when you retire. God bless the millennials and Zs. They're like, you take a new job every 3 weeks, and then you go on to the next thing. But for those of us who struggle thinking we can't leave this thing, this is not a marriage, and you did not say till death do us part. You're not always meant to stay somewhere for forever.
Right.
So I think also recognizing that is an important time to just kind of exhale and say, it's okay if I leave this thing that's not working for me, even if it used to work for me and it's not anymore. Also really prioritizing, like recognizing your self-care. You mentioned that you really pulled back and started pushing time into more hobbies. I think one reason you could have I might have known for 12 years that I was a square peg and I didn't fit in this round hole. But you put a lot of energy into self-care. You really refilled your well when you weren't at work. And I think that's probably what made it possible for you to do that. Amber, what are some of the things when we talk about kind of prioritizing yourself and self-care? What might, for people who are horrible at that, they don't even know what that looks like.
Shelly, it means golf lessons.
Oh, it does.
Shelly, if you follow the podcast for any length of time, we've been trying to find Shelly a hobby for 20 years. And so she's going to take golf lessons. We actually have a plan. I'm so proud of her.
And my very dear friend was like, you know what? I need to take golf lessons. And I just joined this place to take golf lessons. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just joined that place too. So I think even God wants me to take golf. So
I'm gonna do it.
Stay tuned.
I can't wait.
I bought golf clubs 3 years ago, so it's happening. It's coming.
We may have to even take Caleb out there to video you at some point.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to have some proof.
Or yes, I love it. But no, I think sometimes too, just evaluating like what it can be something so simple. Like which we talked about your magazine, your outdoor magazine. What is it called?
It's called Strung Sporting Journal.
Strung.
Strung. Okay. The name was from a different owner. It carried over, but it's what led me to that is outside of family and working. The big things I like to do are fly fish, get into the mountains, and I started hunting 3 or 4 years ago, honestly, as a healthy lifestyle. That could be a whole nother podcast in itself because I think it's a very interesting thing. But anyway,
we should do a whole podcast on hobbies.
Okay. That is a good idea.
And we did do a podcast on self-care, and we talked a lot about making sure that first your mind isn't that self-care is selfish, which I struggle with. I also think one of the things that creates burnout in physicians, and this is so sad, but so true, I think, of all of us. I had a friend who was doing some videoing of me one day, and I've known her most of my life. And she was like, "Do you know what your life is?" She works she works for a major network and has a lot of meetings and is a VP. And she's like, "Your life is like 15-minute meetings that go one right after another all day, and you are late for most of your meetings." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is totally my life." And I thought she told me that 15 years ago, and I was like, "That is still my life." However, we live in a talk faster, I'm running late, and so I even find myself in the evenings thinking like at the dinner table, I wish you people would talk faster because I have places to be. And I do not have places to be, but I'm getting so programmed after so many years of doing that just breathing, meditating, having healthy. So
I think some people don't even know what they like or want because it's either pressure to feel like you're supposed to, or you have no idea. You don't take the time or the space to just sit. I think people get nervous when it's quiet. Like, I'm a talker, you're a talker. We probably don't like silence very much. Like, I can literally talk to that wall. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people won't sit. That's true, Sammy. He followed me around the clinic. Yeah. He knows I can talk to the wall. And so, just a lot of people aren't good with silence or just...
Well, and especially if you're in burnout, when you sit with silence, you start feeling what you're trying not to feel. You start recognizing what you're not sure what to do with. And so I think sitting in that calm, when I think of sitting in the calm, I think of meditating and I think of mindfulness. And I think people who are struggling with, I know I need to do something different, I'm not sure what that looks like. We are huge fans of therapy. There is not a person on the face of this earth, in my opinion, who doesn't benefit from sitting with a good therapist and really just figuring stuff out. Life is hard and we have stuff to figure out.
Well, and of course, like you've mentioned Beth, but talking to your significant other or your family and saying, what does this look like? What do I look like? It's sometimes hearing hard things, which I'm assuming y'all had to have those conversations because you're making a big life change.
And I think part of it involving your significant other, because they want to be there to support you, but it's easy to want to hide that from them because you don't want to burden them.
And my job is to be the provider for this family, and I'm going to show up and tell you that I might not be able to provide the same. And you can go through so much internal dialogue to talk you out of that conversation. Yeah. But then when you sit down and you realize your loving spouse really does want you to be happy, and your loving spouse recognizes that you're bringing some of this unhappiness home, and it's not a service to the family either.
Right.
I think taking yourself off the island and getting the people who love you involved in recognizing.
It's a big step.
Yeah, it's a big step. It's a hard, scary step, but it's so important. Yeah. And I think more times than not, you'll realize if people love you, They want to help you navigate this as well.
I think involving your spouse, we're talking about self-care and all that stuff, and today's day and age, like, you got to put your cell phone away and get away from the internet first and foremost. Because people come into the emergency department because they get a little symptom and they read about it, so anyway, that's a big thing. I read a book that was very instrumental too. It's by John Mark Comer. He's a pastor. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's so good.
Have you had it?
Not everyone
I have
read that. Caleb, our podcast guys over here nodding.
Yes.
I'm the only one. Okay.
I'll bring it to you.
It is so good. I've read it 3 times now. And every time I find new stuff in there. But I mean, so, it's
a podcast.
He does. And he's got another book that I'm listening. Yes, Practicing the Way. But, if you're not a Christ follower, these are very biblical books, but there's a lot in it, even if you don't believe in Christ yet.
And I love just the title of
The Ruthless Elimination
getting rid of hurry.
Yeah.
That's huge. And getting rid of interruptions. And the next thing I was about to say on ways that we can protect ourselves from burnout and solve the burnout solutions is boundaries.
Yeah.
And so creating that, I'm putting my cell phone aside. I'm telling people, I now train our new providers to say, when someone inappropriately asks you to do something medically that they shouldn't. So your friend becomes your patient, and then they're texting you at 3 a.m. to say, hey, I need you to do this. You need to never do it, and go straight to creating that boundary to say, when this happens, I desire to help you. The way that you get help is call our office. We have an emergency on-call doctor. It's not me tonight, because you have every right to get to put your phone away when you're not on call. And so I've started, because the first time you do it, when you do stuff for people and it works for them, they keep asking. It doesn't make them a bad person. You have to create that boundary. I used to get so mad at people for asking me to be a doctor when I was trying to be not a doctor in that moment. And then I realized it's okay for me to tell them that I'm creating this boundary, and that I'm not practicing medicine at this dinner party, and I'm not going to look at your rash.
Right. To help my colleagues in emergency medicine on a grander scale, it's the same thing with the emergency department. You immediately entitle people to get immediate care and everything they want right there, right? And that's not what the emergency department is for.
Yes.
So, sorry,
But creating the boundaries
Yes,
for
They need a good primary care
Helping.
to bug,
Yeah.
right? Don't go to the
see your
ER.
primary
Go see your
doctor.
primary care.
Helping educate people too, though,
Yeah.
about what is the right way, and we try to do that. What is the right way to navigate and use a complicated healthcare system?
And
helps create these
And
boundaries.
cell phones allow you to do that. I put mine on Do Not Disturb, so I
Yeah.
have no idea. I might wake up to 100 text messages, and I'm like, well, I didn't hear any of
I
them
had
because it
every
went to
right.
me.
I had every right to sleep last night, and which is another way to deal with this stuff is in your self care.
Rest.
Make sure you're sleeping. Make sure you're listening to your body. We didn't even go into the hundreds of symptoms that come from burnout. Burnout is
kill you.
psychological and emotional becomes a physical.
Yeah.
You feel it in your gut. You get headaches. You're getting
Cortisol's
sick more
high.
often. Everything. You're anxious. You're not an anxious person, but you feel racy, anxious all the time. These are all indicators that you need to do something. But in that, you have to kind of create part of your self-care program of what am I doing with these physical symptoms, and it's time to act. So we've talked about boundaries. We've talked about talking to people that, whether it's the people that you love that are in your friends and family group, whether it is your boss, sometimes you might like the job and you might not like the situation, and your burnout might
I'll
look
say
very
this.
much like not being supported in your work
Well,
environment.
for you, we have provider quarterly meetings where we talk, and so there have been times you've changed my schedule because of my kids' sports. That was the most important thing to me, and you're like, well, then how can we accommodate that? Now I know not everybody boss does that, but for me,
But
that
if
was
you
a
want to
huge.
keep good employees, bosses, do that.
Yeah.
Do that. Why can't you help people have a better work-life balance? In every one of our quarterly meetings, so if you don't want to burn your people out, take this small piece of advice. In every one of our quarterly meetings with every one of our providers, I say, how is your burnout? I don't ask, do you have it? Because doctors won't admit that they have it. I say, how is it? I assume they have it. And then some people are like, it's great. I don't think I should. And then other people are like, funny, you should ask. And I ask every single time, how can I better support your work-life balance? Look, employers, as much as we feel like we are the center of people's world, people work for other reasons. They don't work as their sole existence. If work starts getting in the way of the other reasons, people won't be able to stay. If you want to keep your good people, have their work support their home.
Yeah.
Don't ask their work to replace their home, because I don't want to employ someone who's willing to put their family second.
Yeah. Well, and it was an easy, literally, we shifted my appointments by 15 minutes. It wasn't a huge change, but my daughter's game.
When you have that last person come in and you start feeling I'm going to be late for it, I've got to go pick up.
Game. Yeah.
And, I think we've got to recognize that we live in a society that is mostly double income homes. And so who's picking the kid up from day to day? Most of these people have jobs.
Yeah.
And so when that's the case, let's support people to just give them 10 minutes to get to school on time. I mean, there are times when Colin, my son, gets in the car and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm 30 minutes late. And there was, nice parents sitting there waiting for him to get picked up while he sits on the curb, and they just want to make sure he's safe. And I was like, buddy, they're judging me, aren't they? And he's like, Mom, they're judging you. No, I'm sure they weren't, because they were super sweet to wait and watch him. But, it's stressful. It's stressful trying to do it all.
Yeah.
And I think a big solution for burnout is stop trying to think you can do it all.
And that's what matters to you. What matters?
Do what matters. Prioritize what matters. Put your time and energy into the things that matter. Create your boundaries to protect the things that matter. Work on your own self-care techniques. Mindfulness is a great one. There are little mini mindfulness techniques. My favorite is a moment to arrive. And I would say when people are struggling with burnout, a moment to leave. Get into your own brain when you sit down in your car to leave your job and say, that is over. Let me process whatever I just experienced. Let me exhale. That person screamed at me. Let me let that go. My boss belittled me. That's on him, not me. I'm not a bad person. He is. And whenever it's bad bosses, I make them males. Just happened to hear myself do that. It's totally bad. But if you just take a moment to leave and you let it go, and then you take a moment to arrive when you get home and say, I only get this limited amount of time with my kids. Let me remind myself how much I love them. Let me say a prayer. Let me, one of our providers struggled with burnout, and he simply would go to his car at lunch and take a moment to recenter himself. And then he could come back and he did the same exact job with the same exact people and struggled with burnout less. And then I really feel like finishing, we talked in the first episode about this cycle of what happens with all of our catecholamines and our epi and our norepi, and we're in this, I'm constantly running from a bear and I never finish that process, and just letting yourself finish that process, whether it's box breathing, the deep breathing.
Well, as soon as you did that, I went, it just takes a second to
finish the process.
So much better.
Recognize that some stuff makes you feel on fire, and you need to put that fire out, or else that fire is going to stick with you until you burn out. And so really recognizing you don't have to carry this stuff everywhere you go. You need to process it. You need to feel it. And for some people, you're going to stay in the same job that you have, and you're just going to do that better. You're going to balance that better. You may love your job and have a supportive work environment, but you don't have boundaries, and you love that job so much you're doing it at midnight. And so maybe you stay in the job, but you figure out how to create boundaries around the job. And then for other people, it's going to be similar to Sammy's story.
Which I was like, and it's Sammy is, because y'all haven't even said it yet.
We haven't even said it yet. So Sammy has done the brave thing, and he said,
so brave.
I spent the majority of my 20s becoming a doctor, and then I spent my 30s working in an ER, and I'm going to leave the ER. This isn't right for me. This was maybe this was never right for me, and that's okay. I'm going to take the lessons that I've learned, and I'm going to leave the ER. And so Sammy is joining us in primary care. And we are super excited. He's going to help work in our urgent care. He's going to help take care of patients.
I mean, what great, how blessed are we? We get an ER physician that helps with our urgent care.
I know, right? How blessed are our patients?
I know, right? Well, our
patient
patients care.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me.
Yes. You may not be able to find an ER doctor in the ER, but you will find them in our
urgent care. That's amazing.
And one of the things that I think it will stick with me as well, and one of the first days that Sammy was seeing patients with us, He came out and he kind of looked like big eyes, and I was like, is everything okay? And he's like, that patient just said that they liked me and said thank you.
And they hug you?
And yeah, oh my gosh, they hug me all the time. Yesterday I said to one of my patients, are we forgetting anything? And she was like, yes, you're forgetting something very important. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, what? You didn't give me a hug.
Yeah.
And so I hugged my little old lady. And so, you know, it stuck with me so much that you can do what you're trained to do. And do it for people who appreciate it in an environment that might suit your personality better. And you don't have to abandon the entire ship. You just have to sail in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that, the self-care thing can only take you so far. If I think that was helpful when you were talking about that, because, you know, I run several times a week, work out, fish, work in the garden, you know, spend time with the kids and Beth. And those are all, especially the family, everything I am doing is to make sure that my family unit is full of joy and that we're positive with life and that we do the best for each other that we can. But the self-care can only go so far. You can exercise and de-stress, but you can't get rid of that. And so I think this was a big step for me. But again, we talked about this. For me, it was I needed to trust Christ. I needed to go out on faith, and he opened up doors through our mutual friend David Cannon, who's a photographer who actually got me into magazine and photography.
He lives here. I don't even know the guy, and somehow he introduced me to you. He knows
Brian Kirkland. Yes, yeah. And so that's how but to me, that's not coincidental.
Kevin Bacon that we ended up talking
yeah. I mean, it really did. And so anyway, that, kind of you said you got to get out of the fire to know what else is out there. And that for me, and getting to meet all of y'all here in the clinic and getting to see how it works and getting to spend time with the patient and not feeling rushed and pressured, although y'all may, I don't know. It definitely seems different.
Depends on the day.
Some rooms you want to spend more time in than others, that's all.
So it was good to have this opportunity. I know I haven't jumped into it yet, and I've had this 2-month period where I'm still kind of in an interim phase.
And I think that too is just, you know, really being able to close the door before you open the new one, so that you're not bringing stuff with you that you haven't been able to process. I think, you know, you have 12 years of unfinished fight or flight that you've been processing, but you told me you weren't sleeping, and now you're sleeping through the night.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And
like, so, you know, I love sleep so much.
I think if we were to kind of summarize, there are people who I think when you start doing the self-care, you feel that the fire has gone away and you can return to job and feel better. And then there are times where you know that you're putting a fire out, but then when you go back to work, you're jumping back into a fire. And if that's the time, if that's your situation, then it may be the time to find a different place to report to. I think it was super brave. Amber used the word brave earlier, and that's exactly the right word. It is super brave for people to recognize this is not working and do something about it. The easier path is to stay on the track that's not leading you to where you want to go. It's hard to make these changes. It's brave. It is also brave to tell your story when it's been a struggle. So I can't thank you enough for sharing with us and everyone
You're the new
else.
guy, and we're putting you in a new fire called a podcast.
You sure are.
What is it like for the new employee to have me call and say, Sammy, will you do the podcast on burnout? Because I think your story is going to help save people's lives. You know, Life, Amber and I do primary care in a way that it's not about living longer, it's about living better. And if you live better, you will live longer. Right. And your days will have more meaning. And so, way to be brave and choose what living better looks like. It may or may not be here. If this is, I hope to God you're here in 20 years. But the fact is, you got to try new things, you know, and you got to try new things with an open mind and recognize what your purpose and meaning is all about. So good for you for taking the first step into doing that. We're so excited to have you joining us. And I just really thank you for telling your story. It's so easy for us to get on here and talk about patient stories and things like that. It's never easy for the
super
doctor
vulnerable.
to be the patient.
Yeah, very vulnerable. Very vulnerable. So thank you.
We appreciate that so much. We hope that we have said something for people who may be struggling with some decisions that will help guide you. And most importantly, I hope you take away from this that happiness matters, that you get choices in this life. Choose happy. Thank you so much for joining us.
We like to leave you on a good note. Today's Tell Me Something Good is from Christina Bradford, who's one of our brand new nurse practitioners here. We're so excited to have her, but she's excited to work here. She said she's super excited to come on board with us after being in the ER, working as an ER nurse for the last 20 years. So we're excited to have Christina. So Tell Me Something Good is new employees that
Welcome,
we love
Christina.
and excited. So thank you for joining us today. And until next time, take care of yourself.